I'm going to read you something just to get it out of the way. I'll tell you exactly what this is and fit it into context in a few minutes. Uh, it's just a brief citation. Quote, difficult as the method of revolution is for any Western industrial civilization, it must not be regarded as impossible. If a revolution can destroy social injustice and preserve equal justice, much might be forgiven it in the method it employs. Um, Sounds like the end justifies the means. Now, this little video is about prayer, so what does that have to do with prayer? As I say, I'll get back to that. I'm going to just start off by fitting this into the context of history, which I've done with previous videos. I'm antiquarian. I've studied ancient cultures, not so much Hebraic culture, but the ancient Mediterranean, the Greek culture, and the Psalms and what you might call the hymns that we find in the Old Testament are really very much like hymns that we have from the Greek tradition. When people of those more traditional, you could call them tribal societies, would say a prayer, it would be a hymn. I mean, that's basically what a hymn is. It's a praise of God. It may enumerate some of the achievements of God in creating the world or in doing something special for his people. It may talk about his special attributes, but it's not at all personal. At least that's the way we look at it. That is what would separate our form of prayer most obviously from an ancient form of prayer. Now, I don't know that that's really an accurate statement, though. One might say that if you really ponder the nature of the cosmos, or at least what we understand of it, and also ponder the mystery of it, and maybe especially the things we don't understand of it. But if you take that very broad view, a lot of times what you find is that an answer to your personal anguish or questioning is hiding in plain sight there all the time. So something like a hymn can be very personal, but I'll get back to that in a moment too. Let me just tell you that as with other discussions of this sort that I've had, I don't want anyone to think that I'm denigrating their form of prayer. People have different ways of praying. I think most ministers and religious people that I've ever known have been very quick to acknowledge that. I'm not trying to dismiss or deride anybody who wants to pray in a very personal fashion, who wants to pray for his illness or her illness, or for a loved one who's ill, or for a job interview, or for fair weather for a picnic, or whatever it is. If you want to pray for specific things like that, there is a lot of opinion out there that that's exactly the way you're supposed to pray. Now, that's not the way the ancients prayed, but that seems to appeal to us in our more individualistic culture, and we regard our religion, we regard the Christian faith as a very personal faith. So why wouldn't God want us to ask him for specific things? I'm not like that, and I'm worried that some people might be put off from the faith through thinking that that is the way that one must pray, because they visit a Christian church and they hear that kind of prayer and they think, well, what's the matter with me? I just can't see that that's effective, or it's not rewarding for me. I just can't buy it. So there must be something wrong with me. No, you shouldn't be put off by that. You shouldn't think that excludes you from the faith. I'll just tell you a little bit about an experience of mine, which was pretty painful, but we didn't, my wife and I, have an easy time having our one child. We went through several incidents of what's called early loss, where the pregnancy didn't even last 2 months. I remember in one of those, we I was praying really hard, and I remember going out into the cool evening air and looking up into the dusk, and what do you know, there was that beautiful Venus, the evening star, and the sky was so perfectly violet and clear, and Venus was so golden green and just beaming the way planets do. And I felt it like, wow, that's my prayer has been answered. I just happened to look up, and this is such a beautiful thing in front of me. It can't be an accident. I know my prayer has been answered. This time, this child will live. And it didn't work out that way. And it didn't work out that way in a number of subsequent early losses. In fact, I kind of stopped praying. In fact, I guess I thought, this isn't working at all. Maybe I'd have better luck if I just didn't pray at all. Maybe God wants me to be completely resigned, so I'll act like I don't care, and maybe that'll work better. You see what kind of mind games? I know you do. If you're having a problem with some of the things that are said about prayer, then you've probably been through this whole cycle yourself. You have this self-doubt about, well, maybe God doesn't really like me, or maybe I don't deserve to be liked. Maybe I'm just not a good person. I'm not aware of being a particularly bad person, but then if I were really bad, I probably wouldn't know that I was bad, would I? So, or maybe, and this is something other people will tell you in cases like this, well, it just wasn't meant to be. Right. That couple over there, they have a child, and that couple over there, they have 2 children, and they have 5. And there's someone over there, she didn't even want her child, but God gave her a child. But we're trying oh so hard, and we're trying to create just a perfect little home for a baby, and God doesn't want us to have one. I hate that. I hate that people can transmit messages to other people like that with their beliefs about prayer. Prayer isn't like that. And in my other discussions, and in this one, I said, I want you to be able to, I don't want you to think I'm deriding you. I think whatever way of praying you're comfortable with, then by all means have it. It's your way of relating to God. But that ancient style of prayer, simply where you draw back and think about life begins, life goes through a series of struggles, but also there's great beauty in the world, but eventually life in this world ends, and there's much mystery in it all, and God has created it all. And there's much that's beyond what we see and what he has created that we can see. And that's the answer. It's not an answer that we understand, but real prayer, I find, is being able to draw back sufficiently to not to understand, because so many of these times you will not understand. You can't in this life, in this time, but to leave the door open for understanding, to keep from shutting the door and reaching one of those disastrous conclusions based on self-doubt. A lot of times when I pray, I begin with a little meditation about the Word. In the beginning there was the Word, says the Gospel of John, and there are different ways of interpreting that, and it's not necessarily what I'm about to say, but I like to just think about the idea of words. Words allow us to distance ourselves from the objects around us, so that just as in Genesis it says that God allowed Adam to name all the animals. Well, words allow us to name things, events around us. We can view them objectively. We can stand back from them instead of getting sucked in and being just so emotionally involved that we're blinded by what's happening. The word is the power to understand with some objectivity the truth of what's happening around you, and then you have the power to decide how you should fit yourself into that setting, if you should at all. Maybe it's a situation from which you should abstain. Maybe you shouldn't be acting, your impulse is to barge right in there and do something, and maybe you should not. But putting correct words on things allows you that sublime, really divine power. It is the power of prayer, the power of putting words to things, accurate words. It allows you to see the truth, to not get pulled in impulsively so that you're blinded, and then you can understand what your proper response should be. And in other words, you can be a good person, a person who's serving God's will and not your own, or you're not just going off impulsively. Now, the citation that I read you to begin this was a remark made by Reinhold Niebuhr, who was an extremely influential theologian in the middle of the past century. He fled Nazi Germany, I believe, to this country in the 40s, maybe the late 30s, and he became very, very influential in what I would call the secularist church. He had a lot of ties, honestly, to socialist ideas, but so do a lot of churches today. I mean, his idea was that the church was an institution here and now to create a much better world, to bring heaven to earth. Maybe there isn't a heaven beyond this earth, but the real objective of Christianity is right here on this earth to create something so much better than what we actually have. And I actually know a minister. I've had fairly recent contact with a minister, not very happy contact, who prays in just this kind of fashion. It's a sort of crazy visionary. I shouldn't use the word crazy, except that, that's how it comes off to me. I'll just settle for visionary. It's an attempt to envision a better world. And if all of us, oh Lord, could just accept the beauty, the higher calling of the vision, and if we would surrender ourselves to it, all of you in the congregation, surrender, imagine, lift your hearts up. We could create heaven on earth. We could share everything. Stop fighting, stop all wars, tear down all walls, throw open all doors, and tear off all the locks on your doors and on your windows, and everything to everybody. We're all brothers and sisters. Isn't that beautiful? And Reinhold Niebuhr, at the end of that citation, actually says, we shouldn't get too hung up if we have to cut corners and kind of do some marginal things on the way to this beautiful, ecstatic vision. This is how some people pray. They're absorbed into this vision, and it's as if they have blinders on and they have their ears plugged, and if you try to alert them that there's a situation going on right here, right now that needs attention, no, I'm not listening to you. You need to align yourself with the higher power. come on, let's go to infinity and beyond. That's not the way to pray, and I say that pretty confidently. And that's about where I'm going to leave this off. So there's a kind of prayer that makes you feel that you're inferior and that you've failed. And there's this other kind of prayer that tries to suck you up like a vacuum cleaner into some ecstatic vision that has no contact with reality. And then I believe there's the true kind of prayer where you put words, accurate words, to things that are around you today. You name them accurately, you study them, you thank God for them. And this is, after all, what Christ, how he taught us to pray. Thank you for what we have to eat. Thank you for the peace, the context that we live in that gives us a chance to lead a purposive existence. Forgive us our sins. There's recently been a big brouhaha about lead us not into temptation. Pope Francis has said that we don't want to, that's not what that means. God would never lead us into temptation. Okay, but we all know what is intended there. It's alert us to our better angel. Let our better side triumph over our darker side. Help us in the struggle. Thank you for what we have. Make us humble. Forgive us what we've done wrong. Help us to extend that forgiveness to others, and allow our brighter side to triumph over our dark side. That's almost like an ancient hymn. There's not a lot that's very specific there, and yet there's everything you need there to address the specific. If you can get the specific not to be sucked up into that visionary vacuum cleaner where we lose all contact with reality, but simply to take its place in the broader existing reality that we can understand to the extent that we can understand it and that we can name. If you allow that to happen, then you have a good chance of finding peace in prayer.